we can move on to Pluto, and we'll see where it takes us. Let's give our focus on maybe contextualizing them together, right? Like, how do we understand Pluto in Aquarius and Saturn in Pisces, right? Because I think that's one of the areas where most of the deep insight astrologically comes when we start to understand the inherent interrelationship between planetary functions. And it's useful in this case because they are semi-sextile. I mean, they're both just entered new signs at the same time, and they're moving further and further into a new phase. I mean, there's a conjunction in Capricorn just a few years ago. So really tracking Saturn and Pluto in relationship to one another is incredibly insightful. So maybe what I can do, and then we can see where this organically takes us, and just really speak to what is Pluto about, and then how do we understand Saturn relative to Pluto. So Pluto corresponds to desire. And we can say it's desire itself that brings us into this life experience, to have experience, to play out desire. It's the desire for experience. I'm going to find something here. I'm going to attract a relationship. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to fulfill this desire in me. In who? In the soul. The soul itself, it has desire to know itself through experience. And it's going to do that, and it has to play it out. And that's the big thing about Pluto. You have to play it out and go all the way. You know, it doesn't mean everything has to be physically enacted, but every desire in the soul, it's what brings us into this life experience. We have to meet it completely, right? So we can think of our own Pluto position. If we have desires for fame and recognition, we're going to create a human life where one way or another, we're going to meet that and in some way or another exhaust it. It's like all desires are to be exhausted at some point. The purpose of their exhaustion is so that we can then generate a new one and continue to evolve and awaken. And that's what Jeffrey Wolfgreen describes as the evolutionary journey of the soul. The gradual exhaustion of all desires until the only desire remaining is the desire to reunite with the source. Yeah. So we all have to appreciate that if we're here, it's because we have a desire for something. And another way to think of it, have we ever gotten triggered or felt a strong craving or felt a strong aversion? That's Pluto. Strong aversion, strong craving speaks to there's something in me that's resulting in my either strong need and obsession with experience or resistance to experience. What is it I'm attached to? What experience am I attached to having that I'm so triggered by comings and the goings, that I'm so sensitive to what I don't want and what I do want? So as we become more soul aware, we realize, oh, this is what I'm seeking to realize. How do I want to make conscious choices relative to that? We become less reactive. We become less victimized. We become more empowered within our own soul essence. So that's the essence of Pluto work. Now, everyone is going to manifest within a form, within a body, within a time-space experience. When you understand that Pluto is the core, predominantly unconscious energetic that brings us into this life, desire, we're going to create a curriculum, a template, a form of learning relative to our desire nature, right? What's happening in time and space? Yes, we're going to be working with the particulars of form and bodies and money and relationships and things, but what's the deeper soul awakening at the core of all of this human experience, right? That's Pluto. That's the evolutionary journey of the soul. You know, in 10th grade, we're going to have experiences. We're going to learn. We're going to grow. But if you're not studying, if you're eating all night and partying all night, eating junk food and not studying for your test, then you won't really be able to receive and participate with the evolutionary experiences that you came here to have, right? So we're not going to grow beyond our own psychological fixations and limitations. We'll stay immature. So Saturn at every stage of evolution, for each one of us at every stage of our life, corresponds to the structural realities that we're operating within with respect to our evolutionary purpose. It points back to Pluto. And what's interesting is both Pluto and Saturn correspond to death.
Mm.
Saturn is actual death, timings, endings, physical parameters. Pluto is, well, maybe Pluto is the actual death in the sense of this is actual spiritual death, the ending of identity, right? So it's so real. Like, this is what this life is. You're going to have a caterpillar experience relative to caterpillar level desires, structuring reality at the caterpillar structure of experience, right? The rules of caterpillar world, Saturn, are caterpillar. You got to follow them and live them and play it out. But when you exhaust the desires that led you to this in the first place, you're going to have to let that whole structural reality go. And then the rules and laws and structures of butterfly are a completely different paradigm than that of Saturn. So we're still than caterpillar. So we're always operating within a Saturn dimension, but the dimension of Saturn that we're working with is completely untranslatable to where we're coming from as we evolve. Caterpillar cannot apprehend butterfly reality, different rules, different laws, different limitations. So now when we look at transiting Pluto or Pluto in our own charts, it's very helpful to keep this in mind and to ask the question, what kind of work am I doing? What limits and parameters am I embracing consciously right now that will serve and support the deeper evolutionary necessity currently manifest in my own life? And so that's true just by looking at Saturn and looking at Pluto. And then you add the aspect or the phase between the two, which we won't go down that rabbit hole so deeply, but just wanting to illustrate is a very practical way of working with these two together. So maybe what we can do together is just talk about Pluto in Aquarius and really what its core evolutionary intention and purpose is. And then maybe see how it really works together with Saturn in Pisces.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, I think just a couple of details that I think are, whilst they might be more bigger picture things, they're still important to, I suppose, remember. Pluto in ingressing, 0 degrees of Aquarius is activating the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, right, that occurred in 2020 at 0 Aquarius. So there's that in the mix as well, relative now to Saturn moving into Pisces, right? Like you said, I mean, the way I see Pluto is it's definitely the soul's desires, the soul's drives, motivations, etc. And it's the deepest unconscious component of who we are, right? So it's almost therefore the hidden components of who we are, as it were. And I like that because, Pluto also speaks to the deepest riches that we have within us. That's, if you go back to his mythology, he was digging and digging and digging, in the earth to get to the deepest core, right? And so, because therein lie the riches. So the richness of our soul, in other words, is so deep inside us. And in order to, I suppose, to become more aligned with that, or more aware of that, or more understanding of that, we have to go to territory that is not very comfortable. We have to be exposed, as it were, because Pluto exposes everything that it touches, everything. So there's many different themes that I feel are going to unfold from a collective perspective, but we won't have time to go into that today. So we'll just stick to the more personal level of how people can contemplate Pluto in Aquarius, which I think most people are generally more interested in that anyway. And I think that's more important, actually, because our own personal evolution and waking up, the journey and everything that entails, is what leads to further service and unity, and peace and harmony and all those things. So very simply put, the more work we do on ourselves, the more we can actually help and contribute to the world at large, right? It always comes back to our own self, right? So I just want to read something because I think you'll
Oh yeah.
appreciate this.
EA glass, very nice.
Uranus rules electricity, electronics, and computers. God uses the medium of electricity to project the creation. In human consciousness, the brain is an electrical device. Uranus Aquarius correlate with the synapses in the brain, the radio receiver that is tuned into God's station. I just really love that, really appreciate that. That's, of course, from Jeff's work, describing actually the archetype of Aquarius.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
you know, on a personal level, that could be said that this is an opportunity for us to gain such a deeper connection to source, right? Such a deeper understanding and reflective journey and process of who we are, right, as an individual, and who we've been, and who, like, because we're always becoming, right? We never, nothing is static, right? There's movement all the time, energy, movement. So I think in Aquarius there's a lot of different facets, because there's the facet of trauma. Do we want to talk about that? There's the facet of telepathy. There's so many facets that could be
So many.
so many. Our ideals, you know, our dreams. Then we could add in the fact that Aquarius is a fixed sign, an air sign, but it's a fixed sign. So are we going to have fixed mindsets of what should be, you know, or who we should be? So there's a strong implication of deep transformations and metamorphosis around who we thought we were, and who we are, and who we are becoming, as it were. And the process involves objectivity and detachment. You know, you cannot do it by holding on to and identifying with a singular thing or multiple things. It's really about stepping back. That's what I love about Aquarius. Steps back, has the vision of the broader picture. And I think Pluto in Aquarius is going to stimulate that a lot, you know, collectively and individually. That they're just some thoughts anyway.
Yes. And there's so much to unpack here. You know, Anastasia, my intuition is, and I'm realizing as we're going psychically, I'm feeling like, oh, I got to get back to my family sooner than I thought, because it's bedtime. And we're, as for everyone watching California and Australia, and realizing that I maybe don't feel as spacious in time as it's getting later. So I want to honor that inner sense and not rush this part. It'd be great for us to reconnect and delve more deeply into Pluto. There is a lot that we can really unpack, and I think just like hold a greater container for that. But one thing that I'll just speak to, you know, Pluto corresponds to transmutation. So that's what a caterpillar butterfly situation is all about. It's transmutation. You know, trans is across, right? Mute DNA. It's like our essential structure changes. And then the archetype of Aquarius corresponds to absolute radical change. And this is radical change that occurs in the level of mind. Understanding, and I love that you read that quote, because the physiology of the brain itself is Aquarius, something that many people don't recognize. And I'm so grateful that Jeff Green taught that, because it's an appreciation that thought itself is an electrical process. And most of us are thinking thoughts that resonate with a particular identity. Thought actually follows perception. Perception actually follows desire. We're going to perceive the world out there according to what it is we're wanting to see relative to our evolutionary program. Right? You walk into a room, you're going to be receiving the impressions of everything and everyone around you, not because you're objectively perceiving it. It's all going to hit the places in you that you're working out. You know, it's like true objectivity, true witnessing is actually a total disconnect, not in a negative way, but a total dissociation from one's personal story.
It has to be. Yeah.
Has to be. And so a part of what this transit does is it really brings us into our thinking and into where we've created wirings in the brains. in the brain to perceive our reality according to whatever fixations we're holding on to. And Pluto in Aquarius is a deep calling to wake up to a dimension of power and sovereign agency beyond anything we've known, because specifically with Aquarius, we haven't made those connections. We haven't fired those, synapses yet. And so there's a deconditioning process that says, beyond the threshold of what you've known, there is a paradigm that is incredibly holistic. And Aquarius is also the intelligence of creation. It reflects the mind of God. All archetypes coexist. So there is an unfolding of all things where the individuality of my own soul harmonizes with the totality of creation itself. And just to contemplate bringing that together with Saturn and Pisces, which is also very transpersonal, right? That's bringing in this quality of trust and surrender to a greater plan and will that I can really hold on to. This in total is really bringing us into a time period where we're really called to step outside of what we know and seek openness to a different way, profoundly so. And it would be great to jam more on this, because we know the transits are coming up, Pluto squaring the nodes, Jupiter moving onto the North Node squaring. There's a lot that's really going to be shaking us in a very deep way.
Absolutely. Yeah. The solar eclipse on the 20th of April, 29 degrees of Aries, square Pluto, happens to be right on my Sun and Mercury, because my
Okay.
28 Aries, Mercury's 29 Aries. So but I appreciate that your time is being called in another direction at the moment. I respect that. And what I'd like for us to do, if you are open to it, is to come back and really take a deep dive into Pluto in Aquarius. I
I
think
would be joy to do that. Yes.
yeah, it's worthy of that time for us to do it. And given I feel today has been really it just felt really natural, actually. I've really enjoyed sharing space with you today. So I'd really love for us to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that as well.